understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.
Happy Friday. We are back with another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. Joining me is my guest, Fabian Eberle from Keyless. It's going to be a great conversation. Today, we're going to talk about the deepfake invasion. Can biometrics save FinTech from fraud? Fabian, how are you doing today?
Yeah, hello, everyone. Hi, Namdi. Thank you very much for having us. Doing great. Hope you all well as well.
Hey, man, that's good. That's good. Before we get into it, we're just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. We are streaming live from Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and now we have a stream going from Instagram. And the Instagram folks, you're only going to see me. Hop on our website, join our YouTube, and you'll see our guests. You can get a view of the entire show. On that note, let me reiterate today's title, The Deepfake Invasion. Can Biometrics Save FinTech from Fraud? If you're going to be listening to this on our podcast streams, then we're just going to be, you're not going to see any presentations or anything like that. You'll just hear the audio, which is fine. So let me introduce my guest formally, and then we'll jump into today's topic. Fabian is the co-founder and COO of Keyless, the leader in privacy preserving biometric authentication. Keyless solutions are trusted by major banks, fintechs, and crypto platforms to prevent fraud, improve user experiences, and increase operational efficiency by providing continuous identity assurance without storing biometric data anywhere. Prior to founding Keyless, he led digital strategy and transformation projects at McKinsey & Company and SAP and received his MBA from INSEAD. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So before we jump into it, obviously, everyone, it's interesting, right? Because we have a newsletter that goes out every week now. By the way, guys, if you're not part of the newsletter, go to the website and subscribe, Tech Behind FinTech /subscribe. And a lot of people were really excited about today's topic because you hear about deep fakes and all that. So before we get into it, right, I want to just get some background on Keyless and how you got into the field of biometric security.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Actually, it started different to obviously where we are with so many founding stories. But the initial problem that we wanted to solve was a personal problem that we experienced around holding custody of crypto assets, such as a Bitcoin, in a self-custodial environment, where we wondered why would you need to write down 12 words on a piece of paper to recover your seed phrase, because there's no bank, there's no call center that you could call if you forget your PIN or your password. The password, once essentially that seed, the private key is gone, the asset is gone. And we had the idea, why wouldn't you use something like Face ID to just generate that password and get rid of that without having to have a device, without having to know any password or remember a PIN. So we thought, why wouldn't you be able to generate a cryptographic key from a user's face? So that was the initial technical challenge that we wondered and thought about. And we, through some coincidence and research, we met one of the leading academics in the field who introduced us to another academic who both co-founded the company with us, who've been researching at that very intersection of cryptography and biometrics for decades in the academic domain. So that was the knowledge and the platform that we could start off of to essentially build what we have today. So what we're doing technically under the hood is essentially generating cryptographic keys from a face in a secure, reliable way without having to store biometric data in the process in a biometric-enabled manner, essentially using a face to generate the key to the password without having to store anything. And then we realized that capability isn't just a capability that we could use to hold custody of crypto assets, but it essentially is a much broader issue around digital identity that we have online. So we more or less, rather than pivoted, focused on the broader picture around solving identity and authentication for both workforce and consumer use cases.
All right, so that's really interesting. So I just want to kind of get an understanding of how that works. So you have a situation where everyone has a face. That's the one thing we all have in common. So based on a person's face, you take digital cryptographic keys based on that face, but it's broken in. So it's not just one key, it's distributed across many different ones. But the thing I want to understand, where is that information stored? I mean, I know obviously I read Get Back, you have it in a decentralized type of storage facility. How does it work? So now, how can I leverage that now to gain access using my identity based on those keys? How does that process work?
Yeah, maybe let's take a step back, and essentially what we're doing is biometric authentication. When you think about biometric authentication approaches, you can distinguish, say, two ways of doing so. On the one side, there's the device native approach. Think of Face ID on the iPhone, or the platform authenticators that natively come with the OS or the device, which don't really authenticate us as users behind the device. They rather unlock access to our devices that we're proving to be in possession of. If you've ever lost your phone, recovering access to your bank account isn't just as easy, because you have to re-enroll your face on any new device and then re-establish trust that you're actually the person who owns or is the legitimate account holder. So things like account recovery, step-up actions that require that true identity assurance of actually authenticating the person rather than only the device is a big disadvantage of that approach. On the other side, that approach is great because there's no biometric data that ever leaves the device, because both the enrollment, when you add your face onto the phone, and the authentication, that matching of the face that you present into the camera against the template or the face that is locally stored, all happens on the device. So no biometric information was ever leaving the device, which is a great benefit of that approach. On the other hand, you have the server-side biometric approach, where the matching doesn't happen on the device, but remotely on a server, which has the big benefit of actually authenticating the genuine person. It's independent of the device. You could use any device that has a camera where you look into the camera, the facial features are extracted, are sent to the server, are matched against the template or the face that is stored in the database remotely. If those match, the result is positive and the binary yes is returned and you're logged in, or you can perform that action. The big disadvantage here, though, is that all of this sensitive personal information or the biometric templates need to be centrally stored on a database. So it's a massive risk from data breach security perspective, but also user consent has to be managed very carefully because that data doesn't reside on the device in the control of the user, but remotely on someone else's database. So what we've done with Keyless is essentially combine the benefits of those approaches. So keeping the security and the privacy aspects of the local biometric system, but marry it with the benefits of a true device agnostic server-side approach that actually verifies genuine user identity, irrespective of the device, in a way that, we're using cryptographic techniques without going into the detail there, but essentially transforming facial vectors when you look into a camera into what we call zero-knowledge biometric data. So one-way cryptographic transformation. And that cryptographic quantity is what we store server-side. This could be hosted on a cloud environment or on-premise with a company. But the important aspect of that information is that it doesn't constitute biometric data anymore. So it's not personal identifiable information. And the other aspect here is it isn't just decentralized or split into many pieces, but it's truly transformed, and you cannot link the data that is stored to an individual. And that is very important from a privacy compliance perspective or a regulatory perspective, because even if you hash the information or if you shard the information, if you can link particular elements of cryptographic quantities to a face. So if I go on your LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram page, I get an image of yourself and I run it through that algorithm that I have in control, and I can generate the same cryptographic quantity. I can tell whether you exist in the database. And as soon as I can perform that link of the information stored to an individual, it is classified as personal identifiable information. And that isn't the case with the approach that we are taking. But yeah, it's essentially using cryptographic techniques to transform the facial features in a way that they cannot be reversed and they cannot be linked to the original image.
Okay, no, that's interesting. So I just want to reiterate to make sure I understand it, right? I love how you broke it down with the existing approaches and then your differentiating factor. So you mentioned and gave a great example of the iPhone technology in which you can, your cell phone, you can unlock it using your face, right? But in that approach that you mentioned, the data is stored locally. So it's not a situation, you're basically retrieving access to that phone based on your biometric data that is local on your phone. Now, using that same theory or same technology, but now from a server side, the third-party entity, which could be the bank or whatever that needs to authenticate you, they have your biometric data, but that's stored in their server. So that's linked, that's in a database. The difference now is that information can be traced back to you as an individual because that's your biometric data. So that's PII right there, whether it's a hospital, whether it's a bank. Now, with Keyless's approach, you said you marry them, those two approaches, but the difference is you now take, you use the face and then you transform the features in your own proprietary cryptographic technology. And now you could authenticate, but all of those different keys cannot be linked back to the original user. Did I miss anything there?
Yeah. No, that's correct. Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to, because look, even though, and I'm telling my audience, God, even though I have a background in this stuff, people think just because you do technology, you just know all the technology. No, I mean, there's so many different facets, and I have no background in biometric security. Conceptually, I'm in security, so I get what he's doing, but this stuff is new to me too. So I try to, when I talk to guests, I try to just to reiterate it so that my guests can also, my viewers can also understand the situation. No, man, that's totally fascinating. I like how it started from an original problem in which no one wants to, the whole seed phrases and all that stuff when you're dealing with your crypto, right? It's like all these, like, why do we have to do that? Why can't we have another way? And then and then sometimes we have challenges like that. And I can speak from personal experience. You get discouraged because you're like, wow, I don't have the research, or I haven't been researching this field in a long time to understand technically how to accomplish it. So you guys go, you know what? We're going to link with academics that's been doing this and have them as a co-founder and try to solve this problem from a higher level. No, totally love it. It's a lot of lessons there. So I wanted to jump into that because I've been ever since I met you and you talked about what you're doing. I've been totally fascinated by it, and I just wanted to get a better understanding with this type of questioning. Now, what everybody came for, we're going to tie everything together. The deepfake invasion. So we all been seeing it, right? I mean, it started off as memes. You get these celebrities or politicians. It's a total deepfake, and you have former presidents rapping like Kendrick Lamar, right? So it's obviously not them, right? But it's absolutely hilarious, and it's all fun and games, right? Now, until you see a world leader talking about a nuclear war and he sounds serious, right? And then it's not so funny anymore. It's actually can scare people or cause huge issues because other leaders may take him seriously, or certain organizations, and it could just go down. It's a rabbit hole. Obviously, there's cases of fraud there. So before we jump into it, and I gave a little bit of an overview, can you describe for the audience what is a deep fake?
Yeah. Well, a deepfake is an AI generated or edited image, audio, or video that would depict a person or an artificial person. So essentially, a way of creating that type of personal content through artificial intelligence, neural networks, generated adversarial networks, which seem very real, but in fact aren't.
So, and then, when I want the people to understand the importance of this. I want to drop a case study, and then I want to kind of jump into, with this particular fraud that was committed with a deepfake, let's dive into the different ways that it could have been prevented, and then let's dive into, how we would have, that particular organization could have incorporated biometrics. And I think that might be a good case in point to use it. So let me paint the picture, guys. We're at a it's a multinational financial firm in Hong Kong, right? There's a finance worker there. His boss is the CFO. So he gets into a video meeting with the CFO, in addition to other members of the organizations. Let's just call them a board. The CEO wants them to wants him to authorize a wire for 25 million. So he's on picture yourself on a Zoom call. You have your boss and a bunch of other executives. Everybody on the team, votes, send the 25 million. We all approve it. This guy's a worker. He does what he's told. The only problem is his boss, the CFO, was not really his boss. It was a deep fake. The other members that were there, other employees, were also deep fake. He was the only real person on this call. Yet he ended up paying out 25 million. It was exactly 25.6 million, 200 million Hong Kong dollars. So it was elaborate, right? Because the questions that will come up is, number one, how did the fraudster get the deep fake of the CFO? Not only that, how did he know how did that organization know which executives to put on that call? So that means he got deep fakes of all those executives. I mean, we understand a CFO, you may have had interviews out there, you may have different videos online people can get access to publicly, but the other members of the organizations, that's really interesting. So Fabian, I want to turn that over to you, right? What are some of the things that could have prevented this?
Yep. I think this was the first real prominent case of a deepfake from around a year ago. Unfortunately, there's been many more. I recently heard about last month in France, where a woman thought she was in a relationship with Brad Pitt and paid out 800,000, I think 300 euros to a person. So lots of love scams happening, just scams at scale that are happening, unfortunately. But yeah, with that case, if I remember correctly, it was that the finance worker was suspicious that why is the CFO asking him to wire 25 million? But then he thought all the other people looked so real, and he knew the other people on the call, at least some of them, that he thought, okay, this must be real, and this is a legit request. And then he carried on doing what he was asked to be doing. But yeah, that, I think, first of all, it's scary, and it's happening, and it just continues to happen. Not only at that type of scale, but you could think of all the possibilities that AI is giving us is misused for fraudulent purposes. So sorts of phishing and a lot of personalized attacks where you just think it might be people in your networks, your friends, your family, etc., asking you for things, or the audio that really sounds like your mother is in trouble and is asking you to wire money then and there. And there's obviously a lot of psychological tricks that fraudsters are very well aware of that they would use. But in this case, or in many cases, what we believe is that biometric authentication, or essentially AI, is the solution to those AI-powered fraud attacks. And what a biometric system essentially allows for is assuring the identity of the person. In this case, when logging on to that Zoom call, and really making sure it is the person who's logging in there with their legit employee email or the account in joining the call. And then obviously additional elements or analyses that you could run while the video is going, or the audio is essentially presented and analyzed. I think that is that. When you think about the biometric aspects of that, or how to circumvent a biometric solution, there's really two ways. On the one side, there's so-called presentation attacks. So when you have a deepfake, think of an image or an audio stream or a video that you would present, in this case, into a camera to essentially fool that biometric system that it isn't me, the face that is generally held in front of the camera, but an AI generated deepfake of myself. And you would circumvent essentially the security measures of that biometric system. And the answer to that is good liveness detection, meaning that you can distinguish a real human from an AI-generated picture or video of that very person that is held into the camera. This could happen in an active way. We have a challenge response, typically head movements, like when you're asked to look left, right, smile, blink, or nod your head, which I think might be a solution in the short term, but AI is really I think getting smarter and smarter, and it's not really a solution that would hold off those AI algorithms, because they're so smart they would just do whatever that active challenge response requests the user to do. So having an AI deepfake look left, right, smile, or blink isn't really the issue anymore. The other aspect there is passive liveness, where all of this happens without asking the user to perform an active challenge. So this would look at multiple things like the depth of an image, reflections, micro movements, different motion signals. You'd have the accelerometer, gyroscope of the device, and things like that. So there's multiple models that you could have run to essentially distinguish a deepfake from a real human, to make sure that it is a real human and that person at that very moment in time that is then matched against the respective template to assure it is the right person as well. So that is it from a presentation attack perspective. The other, I think, equally important threat, if not more, is a threat around injecting deepfakes into the system or around the system. Meaning, if you think you have your phone, that you take that deepfake and rather than spoofing the solution and holding it in front of the camera to then essentially spoof the algorithm, you would inject that deepfake around the camera directly into the system. So you could get around the device security capabilities and inject the deepfake directly into the SDK or the API of, say, a browser-based solution, that you circumvent all those liveness technologies and whatever that biometric modality would offer. That is the other threat. And there you could also look into things like obviously metadata and watermarking, crypting the streams, etc. Those two aspects from a presentation attack and an injection attack perspective are things that a biometric system needs to assure that they're capable of preventing.
Can you dive into the injecting a deep fake into the system and how that works? Because I'm curious about that.
Yes. So essentially, it would essentially allow an attacker to inject, say, a piece of code or the image directly into the program, essentially. So there's not an image of yourself that I hold in front of the camera to then spoof the solution, but you would essentially get around the solution directly, inject the result into the stream. So basically there's no way of, even if the solution would be able to tell whether it's a deepfake or an AI generated image, the solution isn't even part of. The result is already a yes, it is that person, because I'm injecting the whole thing around that biometric pipeline.
Okay, so I get it. So instead of necessarily leveraging your biometrics as you would by looking at it, they're basically taking the solution and programmatically getting it into the system they're attacking.
Yes.
Got it. Wow. Okay. No, so that's all, very interesting in terms of deep fakes. Let's let's talk about this, right? Right now with the current technology in terms of, in that scenario, right? We have fingerprinting, we have facial technology, we have voice patterns, we have behavioral biometrics and so forth. I mean, you have other things outside of biometrics, regular security stuff like multi-factor authentication and using these steps. I'm just really curious about these types of attacks in terms of, you know, this deep fake attack, or even like a business. I mean, before it was deep fake, it was like a business email compromise. The whole idea is you're trying to pretend to be someone you're not, someone who has authority, talking to someone else to say, okay, I need you to do this. So it's usually a CEO, CFO, I need this wire done, whether that's on a business email. Now it's the technology is a little bit more sophisticated. So now we're talking about deep fakes and actual replicating the likeness of this individual. Um, a lot of times with security, and we start talking about, I'm a firm believer in process. Like I never really understood why, based on a phone call, based on an email, someone will just wire money. It's like from a process standpoint, something seems fundamentally broken there, you know.
Yes.
Yet these types of scams happen a lot. It's like, and maybe I'm a little bit jaded because of my security background. I just like, why would you just send someone money just because you read it? Like it's a whole bunch of things that should happen. You sending this person any type of funds. And I think outside of the heavy technical things we can throw at it, whether it's biometrics, whether it's AI, I just think a lot of the stuff is implementing the right process and procedures. Uh, during your explanation of keyless earlier, you mentioned the differentiating factor is it cannot trace those keys back to the individual user because they're introducing privacy concerns. Can we talk about, like, in the industry of we're talking about biometric security, what type of privacy concerns have you seen those things introduce outside of obviously the way you guys are doing it?
Yeah. And to the earlier point, absolutely agree. Technology is certainly a big part of a solution, but process is very important. You should have, say, a multi-layered approval approach for sending at least high amounts of money. And the other aspect is just, I think with these threats, you need education and training around social engineering, around deepfakes, that not every face or every soundbite is actually your mom on the phone. But you should realize that if someone asks you for your bank details or a wire money, that you should at least think or just ask very normal human questions. I don't know, even asking if whatever meal you had last night is probably much better authentication and deepfake prevention than the technology would be able to give you in that instance.
I hate to be the guy that jumps from topic to topic, but it's funny you mentioned that, because I was on WhatsApp and someone was pretending to be my mom, and they saw it's just like I had like different people pretend to be other people, and like I literally just start asking questions that, like, oh, so what and personal questions. Just start randomly asking these personal questions. Then all of a sudden the conversation goes silent.
Yes.
But you just reminded me of that, because it's a human thing to do. It's like, for instance, if someone was pretending to be you and calling me randomly, I'm going to say, oh, where was our last conversation? We saw each other face to face. Oh, how did that go? What did we do? You start asking these types of questions that only me and you would know. I mean, with some deductive reasoning and some they could probably find out, but it's little things like that. Oh, that was the first, second, or third time we saw each other.
Yes.
I noticed when these types of fraudsters contact me in different channels, and I start to do that, the conversation goes really blank. It just stops. So, and this is maybe something we can give to the audience, right? If you're in a situation where someone's pretending to be someone that or whether it's in your business, personal life, start asking personal questions and firing them off, and just wait for a response. Usually, they'll stop talking to you because they wouldn't know that answer. So I'm sorry to interject. It's just that when you said it literally reminded me of a situation that happened with my mom about a month ago, because she was compromised. I told her, like, why you click? And she was so upset at herself too, because I always tell her not to click links. And they got me because she was traveling and something came through and she clicked it by mistake. And then they started to contact everyone in my family, pretending to be her. But with me, I'm like, this is what I do for a living. I'm like, this is ridiculous. One, she's not going to be asking these questions on WhatsApp. And two, I'm just going to start asking you personal questions. That's what I always do. So I'm sorry, it just reminded me of that when you say
yes, sometimes the answer or the solution is the easier of many, but often people don't think about that. But coming back to your question around privacy and biometric data. So in itself, server-side biometric technologies are used and they are deployed at scale in many parts of the world, but typically they're deployed for a very specific use case. Often this is around account opening, identity verification, where you are able to essentially digitally onboard to a service, whether that's a bank, fintech, crypto, sports betting, gaming site, and you present your government-issued ID, your passport, driver's license, and you perform the face matching to then establish and create your account with the identity of yourself that has been validated. But then in today's world, you're offered the regular credentials with username, password. You also add your phone number, so you get SMS one-time passwords as a means for two-factor authentication for some high-risk actions. But essentially, that ongoing authentication paradigm has absolutely nothing to do with the actual identity that established and created the account in the first place. So they're siloed. And that is the issue that today drives all the problems around phishing, social engineering, SIM swapping, because these are shared credentials. And once you know my password and you can intercept that SMS code, you are me and you get into my account. And the challenge around using a biometric for the ongoing authentication use cases to continuously assure the identity of the user is that it isn't a one-time action where you collect the biometric, you need to keep it for 30, 60, 90 days for compliance reasons until the account is properly established, and then you delete the face again, because you cannot delete the face that you're matching against, because you need to continuously match against the face that is stored. And having a face on a database, millions of users' faces on a database, introduces that risk, because you cannot alter a face like you could alter and rotate passwords or keys. It's there forever. And it is classified as sensitive personal information. So you need to protect it in a more stringent way. So if something happens to that type of data, it's obviously the risk and the brand reputational damage and all of that is a lot worse. And with that information out there, you basically cannot alter the information if that face is your password. And the other aspect from a security and risk perspective is that you need to be very careful around obtaining the right level of user consent for what you're allowed to do with the information that I provide. So if you ask for my explicit consent to onboard to an account, and I give you the consent to capture my face so I can open the account, that is great. But then you're not allowed to use this face for other use cases, like, I don't know, I want to recover my account, or I want to use it for logins, or all of it. So you need to obtain explicit consent for each and every use case, or the use that you want to make use of the biometric, especially in the US with BIPA in Illinois, the privacy the Biometric Information Privacy Act, you need to be very careful. And there's been vendors who got into troubles because that consent wasn't explicitly captured or asked for. And yeah, that is essentially one of the big risks, that it is a paradigm where you need to continuously match against an image. It's not a one-off process, but it's one where you need to continuously assure that user identity. Henceforth, you need to store the biometric image, and then needs proper security and user consent management.
So you mentioned while you were talking, it's a few things you mentioned found interesting. I'm just going to point out some. The first thing is, I never thought about this way. It's true, but I never thought about it in this way until you just said it. You can't change your face like you could change a password. So when we have the different policies in tax saying, passwords need to be changed every 60, 90, or 30 days, right? Everyone's used to doing that. We do it, done. We have usually in the multi-factor authentication, it's something something you have physically, and something you are, right? And that's the biometric situation. But you don't really think about it like that. You're right. You cannot change your face. Simple concept, but absolutely true. So, they're sitting on all of this data now, and now you can't, and, based on certain regulatory things that you pointed out, yes, I can use it to authenticate and onboard. But now, what if I want to use it so you can get into another system under the same network? Nope, can't do that, because, but I can, if a password situation, I go, oh, can you please re-enter your password if you want access to this? We can do that. So now you have to now get consent to do all this. So now shifting from place to place. Is something else I want you to clarify that you mentioned? That data has to be deleted at a certain point, because the action of getting you onboarded is now done. You are who you are. At that point, do they usually delete the biometric data?
Yep, not always, but there's typically there's a certain duration that you're obliged to keep the biometric data, like 30, 60 days, after which you can remove that information. Oftentimes the data is deleted, but in many cases the data is also continues to be stored. But yeah, typically that information is at least solution providers would delete that information. If a bank decides to keep the images, that also happens. But from typically the solution providers who offer identity verification services, they would delete those images.
We've all seen cases in which a firm gets breached. The user's information is now taken. Some of that user information includes PII, personal identifying information, your address, even your passwords, right? And that's why once in a while you get this email, look, this system's been compromised, change your passwords, that's put in the dark web. How does that same scenario work if your biometric data is compromised? And the reason I'm asking, one, how does that work if the nefarious actor gets that and then puts it out there? And two, have you seen cases in which that has happened?
That the biometric database has been compromised?
Yeah.
I mean, there's been many cases of that. I think the last one, there was one in Australia recently. I don't know, it skipped my mind. I actually read about that yesterday. There was also one in Italy where a large signature provider has been breached, 5.5 million user accounts out there. But from a biometric standpoint, yes, that has happened. And that is essentially the risk of storing it centrally on the database, that if that breach happens, is not just, say, information around your address data or your passwords that you'd be able to change, but it is your face that you cannot alter or change. That has happened. And that is why it's important, especially for those, say, continuous or ongoing use cases that leverage biometrics from an authentication standpoint, whether that's logins, whether that's securing high-risk actions, allowing for new devices to be bound to an account in a secure way, or recovering an account. It is important to essentially address those privacy limitations that traditional server-side biometric systems would introduce by leveraging technology that already exists and performing this in a privacy-preserving way that actually protects the user when authenticating using their biometrics.
So let's dive into that, right? Because as we talked about before, your passwords you can change. The database gets compromised from an organization, the passwords get out of the dark web. You're like, oh man, I really like using that password. I guess I have to change it now from 1, 2, 3, 4 to 7, 8, 9, 10, right? But if that same thing happens with your biometric data, how does that impact the user? Like, because they now use that information basically forever, because you're not going to change your face, and they can use it. If we start moving forward where more systems are authenticated using biometric data, and they have that linkage between an individual's face and them, can't they use that in perpetuity?
You mean that the user could use that?
No, the threat actor.
Yes, no, exactly. And that is the problem, that you essentially get access to, say, that the password that you're not able to alter to essentially impersonate that individual. But it's also, aside from the security risk of reusing it, it's also a big compliance risk around allowing for that breach to happen, because the fines around that are also quite impactful. So it's way more than hacking a database of passwords, because it's classified as sensitive personal information, and the impact of such a breach is more damaging than the traditional ones.
Wow, man, that's pretty scary. There was something I was reading about. I'm not at. You have some insight on this SIM swapping and account takeovers. Can you know about SIM swap? Can you explain that to the audience?
Essentially, a SIM swap attack is an attack where a fraudster essentially, in simple terms, hacks or mimics essentially swaps the phone number that the one-time password is being sent to. So instead of you receiving that one-time password, the fraudster would receive that one-time password when you carry out an action, because it's the SIM, the SS7 protocol, that has some vulnerabilities, where you essentially, when you perform that login event, you get that SMS sent to your device. It isn't sent to your SIM of your device, but rerouted to the fraudster's or the attacker's phone. So instead of you, they would intercept that one-time password that is being sent to you. So they would essentially use that at that very moment. They know the password because they social engineered you. You clicked on, I don't know how many DocuSign links I receive these days, where then I need to change my password or sign something and put in my email address and password. So the fraudster has that, or gets access to that through social engineering, and then essentially spoofs the SMS the SMS code that is used for the two-factor authentication through swapping that SIM.
In that scenario you just described, how would biometrics play into that to mitigate that type of attack?
Yeah. So the great thing about a biometric is that it isn't a secret that is being shared. It isn't a password or a PIN code that the user needs to remember and share with the party that they're authenticating, but it is generally them, or it is you who is authenticating, not matched locally, but that server-side biometric capability. That is important because we want to authenticate the actual individual behind the device. And that is essentially the answer, that we are not authenticating a proxy like a password, a PIN, anything the user can remember or needs to be in possession of, but actually the genuine person through an inherence factor like a face or a fingerprint that is matched against something that is stored on a server to assure that it is that genuine human performing that authentication action.
With the way the industry is going, right, the advancement in AI, the advancement in a slew of security threats, where do you see or based on your research from being in this field, how do you see in terms of biometric security being the go-to resource? Like right now, do you have like the numbers in terms of looking at finance at least?
Mm-hmm.
How organizations use biometrics and versus, where do you see that going in the future?
Yeah.
Adoption.
No, definitely. So, I mean, if you think about the big trends or the issues that we face, it's certainly that account takeover fraud. I think one of the statistics I read recently was around $13 billion globally. That is growing, depends on the statistics, but huge money that is being lost due to account takeover issues, especially in regulated industries. And there was a recent survey from Liminal, digital strategy firm, who found that 88% of decision makers at banks are actually looking at biometric capability to address that challenge. So biometrics are seen as the solution to counter that threat. Face biometrics are ranking among the highest to be used for biometrics. There's obviously other types of biometrics. There's behavioral elements, so user behavior. You have device signals, geolocation, all of these things. So ultimately, the solution is a multi-layered approach. It's not only one. Exactly, it's also a Gartner statistics. They claim that by 26, 30% of organizations won't trust face biometrics alone because of deepfakes. So yes, the threat is real, but once you layer signals on top of each other, you essentially increase confidence that it is the user. What is important there is that the user experience doesn't suffer. So just adding layer of layer, that is the problem that we have. You send an SMS, you need to remember a PIN, you need to put in your password, you need to put your face. At the end of the day, you said, I don't want to use this service because it's just too complex. So it's important to keep it as simple as possible for the user. The best authentication is if you don't need to authenticate, because it's that person, but unfortunately, that isn't the case at all times. So yeah, the biometric piece is actually one that especially banks are looking at. But then, yeah, traditionally there's that challenge around using a biometric from an ongoing authentication point of view, because you need to store that information. You run into the concerns that we've discussed.
From a keyless perspective and how you implement it, are you with your technology, is that a patented approach in terms of the non-linking the biometric data back to the user?
Yes. No, that is we call approach zero knowledge biometric authentication. That is patented, and there's also other vendors, and Gartner calls it decentralized biometrics. So our approach to that decentralized model, we call it zero knowledge biometrics. But unlike other providers who would shard the data or transform it, tokenize the information, what we do is that we transform it in a way on the device of the user with a key that only the user has. So the user is in control of the information, and the data that leaves the device is no longer considered data. And it's actually confirmed by data regulators in Europe that the data that we store is not PII. We're live since 2020 without asking for user consent under the eyes of the regulator. So it is a pure form of privacy preserving technology that we're very, very confident in. And the other aspect from, say, the privacy preserving character is that it is very performant. So it takes around 300 milliseconds from face capture to result. So to the user, it actually looks and feels like Face ID, no matter what device that is being used. And that is very important, because if that would take 5 or 10 seconds, that may work for an account recovery user flow that you will do once in a while, or I don't know, once at all. But if you need to wait 10 seconds to log into your account, you wouldn't want to do that as a user. So it needs to be very performant, and it needs to be very efficient in the sense that it doesn't drain the battery of an end user device, which is also a common problem with using some of these cryptographic techniques that, they may work in a lab, but they won't work at scale with all sorts of devices that are used.
how does it work? So an example you just gave, it sounds similar to how you first started to solve this problem in terms of someone protecting their wallet and they're using your biometric solution. You mentioned once that information is gathered, the user now has a key.
Yeah. So how we're typically deployed, or Keyless is typically deployed, is through a mobile SDK that is embedded in a consumer-facing app, say a banking application. And what we're doing there is two things. When you enroll and register into Keyless, we're generating a device key, an asymmetric key pair on the device that cryptographically binds the device to your account. And in addition to that, we perform the passive liveness check, extract the facial vectors, and then transform your face into what we call zero-knowledge biometric data, so that cryptographic quantity, which we then store on the server side, to then create essentially a keyless ID that is comprised of your face and any number of devices that you link or cryptographically bind to that account. The other beauty of the system is that we've developed a capability, we call it IDV Bridge, to bridge identity verification with ongoing authentication through Keyless, whereby we're able to leverage existing selfies. You've asked that question previously. So there are banks that are actually storing the selfies, or some store the result file of the KYC process with the image. There it depends on the image quality. But if the selfie is being stored, we leverage that information. So we're able to bulk enroll an existing user base without you as a user having to take another selfie to register enroll into Keyless. But we essentially cryptographically transform the face from the certified selfie that was used in a digital onboarding process, which typically is a trusted image because it was used to onboard the user and open their account. So we can essentially have a user base that already went through a digital onboarding process, no matter who that identity verification provider would be, to be enrolled into Keyless without having to take action and ask the user to enroll.
I'm extremely fascinated with your technology. I would definitely like to just, at another episode, just dive even deeper into it. But definitely thanks for that explanation. Look, I always tell my during the show, I say, I started this platform and this show selfishly, in a sense that I just wanted the opportunity to talk to leaders like yourself, people doing really interesting things in fintech, and just have a conversation about it. And it just so happens other people are watching. So I really, really thank you for your time. I mean, just a little backstory. I've been attending Money 2020 since 2023. And each time there, it's almost like I was getting closer and closer to Fabian. The first time, it's like, past the booth, we talked a bit. Second time, saw him at the gym. Then I saw him past the booth again. I said, let me get a quick interview this time. And now, he's on my show. So who knows, man? I might be in Italy one day having lunch with him. But no, man, it's definitely thank you for your time today. And what I mentioned earlier, what we do now is we're going to give the platform to you so you can talk about Keyless and also how people can find you and whatever else you want to talk about. So I'm going to come off stage and let you do that.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you everyone for watching. So you'll find more information about Keyless at keyless.io. You can reach out, send us an email at info@keyless.io as well. To us, we are the pioneer and the leader in privacy preserving biometric authentication. So we're predominantly working with regulated industries, so banks, fintechs, enterprises of all sorts, to prevent account takeover fraud, to improve operational efficiency, or in other words, reduce call center volumes, reduce the need to send SMS OTPs, which on the flip side also means increase approval rates because those transactions don't have to be blocked. And ultimately improve user experience around authentication, whether that is a login, whether this is a step-up action to secure high-risk transaction, such as address changes, changing the transfer limit, compliant payments, so strong customer authentication, combining two factors and something that's called dynamic linking with one look into the camera. So you don't need to use an SMS OTP. You don't have to have a secure banking app, which many banks still use, especially across Europe, or new device bindings and a self-service account recovery. So you don't have to physically show up in a branch or phone the call center agent and to validate your identity. So if this is of interest, then please feel free to reach out. We're very happy to have a conversation.
Fabian, thank you so much for that. Also, every Friday, 12 p.m. EST, we are live at Tech Behind FinTech. You can visit our platform at techbehindfintech.com. We just launched a newsletter giving you all the latest in fintech, plus all our show interviews and so forth. You can subscribe to our newsletter at techbehindfintech.com/subscribe. That is on the screen. So and put it in some of the comments. So if you go there and subscribe, you'll now be part of the Tech Behind FinTech community, and you'll be informed every week of our upcoming shows. And in addition, all fintech related news that obviously we find interesting and we want to share with you. So definitely go to techbehindfintech.com/subscribe to be part of our community and our platform. Fabian, absolute pleasure talking with you. I learned a lot more about biometric security. It's something that obviously I generally about, but diving into this conversation has been really great for me, and I really appreciate that. So definitely, it's everyone else who joined, as I always say, whether you watched us live, whether you're going to watch us tomorrow or next year, I thank you for your viewership. I thank you for all the behind the scenes message. Thank you for the support. We've been at this for 5 years now. So definitely thank you. You can check out all of our episodes, our past episodes. I'll put a link up. If you go to techbehindfintech.com under podcast, you can look at all our past episodes. We're over 200 right now. So pretty good. You can binge watch us. Right? I never thought I could say that, and now I can say you can actually binge watch our episodes on techbehindfintech.com, which is pretty cool. So on that note, to everyone, have a great weekend. And to Fabian, man, thank you very much for joining the show. Really appreciate you. And you're now our friend of the show. So if breaking news comes up, like this Hong Kong thing or whatever, and something happened that's crazy around biometrics, I'm going to call you and we're going to do an impromptu show and just break down what happened for our users, since you're an expert in that industry. Yeah, of course. And so I think that's it. And on that note, we are out, guys. Have a great weekend. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.